This episode is brought to you by our friends at msnpropertyfund.com. Wealth management is a journey, not a destination. Welcome to the Timers Playbook. On today's episode, we're focusing on homeschooling.
We are a family with 3 children, a daughter who's 19, a son who is 17, and another daughter who's 15. And we chose to homeschool right in the beginning because we had 2 children. We were living in Midrand at the time, and we weren't thrilled with the public schooling system in that particular area.
I'm Tsepo Pule, a husband of 1 and father of 2. For years, my identity had been tied to what I do for a living until the year 2020 when everything fell apart. Hashtag COVID-19. Almost 5 years ago, I became a father for the first time, and I thought I was ready. Looking down at my son's chubby cheeks, my heart filled with pure joy and trepidation, seeing my exhausted wife on the bed after a water birth, I vowed to be the best father ever. It turns out, I wasn't entirely ready to be the best father ever. I had not prepared accordingly for the different stages in my life, career, marriage, and parenting. I have since lost my job, and therefore have chosen to be fully focused on what's important to me. I'm doing right by my vow, and I'm hoping to foster a community of fathers that share similar values. Welcome to the Timers Playbook, a podcast series on fatherhood, proudly produced by 1730 Media. Now, this is a topic that I've been thinking about and debating about and trying to figure out how does it work? Is it something that's suitable for my family? So I found the Millar family. They have embarked on homeschooling for a number of years, but they'll give us a bit more detail into how that whole process works. Welcome, guys. How are you?
How's it, Tsepo? Thank you. I'm Candida, and yes, I've been homeschooling for a number of years.
And I'm Grant. I'm the husband, the father of our 3 children.
Welcome to the Timers Playbook, and thank you so much for giving us your time. Now, I'm going to start with a bit of background about the family. Can you just let me know how many kids you have? Tell us a bit about the family, your philosophy on life, such things.
We are a family with 3 children, a daughter who's 19, a son who is 17, and another daughter who's 15. And we chose to homeschool right in the beginning because we had 2 children. We were living in Midrand at the time, and we weren't thrilled with the public schooling system in that particular area. The classes were huge. Traffic to get there was a nightmare. Anybody from Midrand will be nodding at this point. And so we had a little private school. It was little at the time. It's quite huge now. Quite close. So what we decided was that we already had 2 children, and we thought that they would attend that school, but I would be a stay-home mom, carry on with my studies. I'm a counselor, so I get to do part-time therapeutic work. So I was able to continue with a little bit of a practice on the sideline while still having my children at home. Then we had a 3rd child, and then I realized, right, it's not fair. We decided to send her to creche at a year old while the others start school and I go back to work to pay for it. So we decided we'd homeschool them in those early years. And then we thought we would plug the oldest one in grade 2, the next one, which is quite close in age, in grade 1, and then the last one then can go in at 000. At least they've all had some at-home time with me, and then we would plug them into school. And then it turned out, when we got to that point, it was time to plug them all in, and we had been doing homeschooling for 2 or 3 years with the older 2, and we thought, maybe another year or 2, because this is kind of working. Yeah. I'm going to work. I'm going to pay for additional help as far as house cleaning goes. I'm going to need help with driving, and I'm going to need to pay school fees, and that was pretty much the entire income that I would bring in.
Yeah.
And so we thought, let's continue for a little bit longer. And then 2 left school, matriculated, and 1 is just about to matriculate. So that's kind of how the journey began. But it's been so many beautiful and hard moments around all of those decisions.
So, Grant, would you say then the thinking behind the decision to homeschool? Because from what Candida is saying, does it sound like it's a convenience thing, or is it something that you actively went, researched, and said we need to do this?
It wasn't so much of a conscious, let's now do this for the next 20 years thing. It's not as if we did endless research. So I think it was born out of the fact that we had children. Candida, as the mother of children, enjoyed being with the children as much as possible. I mean, it's a motherly instinct, right? Where the mother would want to spend a lot of time with the children. So it just emanated from that, where we thought, okay, well, let's just extend it into the schooling. So rather than just follow the traditional route of putting them into school, government school or private school even, we decided, let's just try the homeschooling thing. And we made the conscious decision to say, well, let's just do it for a year. If it doesn't work, or if it's too difficult, or it's not a fit for us, then we'll stop. And then we'll go back to the traditional route. But year one passed, it was good. The children were happy, Candida was happy, I was happy. So let's do another year. And then before you know it, 20 years have gone past. And that's all we've known is homeschooling. So our children are, two of them have matriculated, one's in university now. The third one, the last one, is almost getting ready now to matriculate. So we haven't really known any other way.
How were your lives at that time when you made the decision? I ask this because I'm thinking about it. I'm not employed full-time, neither is my wife, but it feels like none of us have time to do this thing.
So I think that's probably the biggest commitment to make, is that you take responsibility for the education of your child or children. And once you say that out loud, there's this wonderful and awful fear that comes upon you that I think is profound in the homeschooling journey. It's a respect for the responsibility, I think, that keeps you motivated, that keeps you in the game, and that starts to help you do the research. Because suddenly you have to start thinking about that. What does each child need? How does each learner function? Everybody's a different kind of learner. Now you have the freedom to see which of your children need what for their best development, for their unique personalities and gifts and talents, to find voice, to find opportunity.
Yeah.
And that's where it starts to become, that's when the spark.
I hear that, but it sounds overwhelming. Like, I think about that, I'm like, I really want to take charge of my children's education. So even today, like, they were drawing or painting or doing whatever. I'm like, that's just too much for me to help them to trace, because they're 5. I mean, the eldest one is 5. Just to help him trace something or draw, it just seems a lot. Is it not overwhelming, especially in the beginning?
I think one of the pitfalls, or one of the things that people think about when they think about this homeschooling thing, particularly the mothers, I guess, because it's traditionally a mother thing, where the mother will look after the children, and thus the mother is responsible for the education of the children. So it's stereotyped a little bit. But one of the fears that they have, or one of the things they expect, is to have this teacher's ability. People think, oh, I'm not a teacher, or I don't have that passion for teaching, or I don't know how to teach, or I don't have a formal qualification, so thus I can't teach my own children. It's not really about that. It's not really about having that formalized education of being a teacher, or even having the desire to be an educator or a teacher. I think, my personal opinion, is it's more about that parental bond. So even though you might not know how to trace yourself, that doesn't mean you can't be with your child and just muddle through tracing. It's not necessarily about being the best tracer in the world. It's about a parent being with a child and they're both together.
So there's words we use to what we call, what Grant is saying there. We're not moving school home. We're homeschooling.
Okay.
And that's one of the big differences. And when you start to research home education, you'll be overwhelmed by the plethora or the bouquet of what's possible, especially now after COVID. But the beauty of homeschooling, the way it was originally intended, and there are beautiful books that I can share with you later, but is to be able to be with the human that's developing in front of you, and to find their unique style and personality and try to get that to come alive. And that is what is beautiful.
Yes.
And you can research that. That is amazing. And the resources nowadays are just, I think that's one of the phenomenal things about it. We were constantly met with comments about, I don't have the patience for this, one thing. I don't have the time for this. Second thing, and the third thing is what he's saying, I'm not educated for this, or I don't have the teaching capacity, I wasn't trained as a teacher for this. And all three of those, you're not going to have the time for anything until you make it, and we all know that.
So you guys are saying that first, like, the conscious decision to want to do this? Like, it's the first big step. And just like anything, I guess, whether you want to exercise or do whatever, if it's important enough, you'll find time for it.
A little bit of that fear factor helps, eh?
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, if someone tells you you are going to die of cancer in 6 months if you do not go to the gym every day for 2 hours and do this ABC, you will do ABC because, man, you value life. And so we are, I think, as humans, have this built-in defiant human spirit to be able to say, I will survive, I will live, I will come alive.
Do you think is what it felt like a little bit? Like if you leave your kids to the world, then as into traditional schooling, then you're sort of like giving them to the world to raise. And
Yeah, there is that aspect where you have to view it holistically. Yeah? So it's not simply about education. It's not simply about what's the best way to get them educated with whatever O-levels, A-levels, degrees. It's a holistic approach in terms of what's the best way to bring up a human being. In terms of teaching them the correct way to live, how to deal with other people. So it's not just the ABCs and the 1, 2, 3s. It's about giving them character, personality, teaching them ethics, and all of those sort of things. And I think that's best done in the younger years by parents, I believe.
Yeah, so I think the one of the other things then that the parents and fathers that are listening, part of that, right, is my kid goes to nursery, whatever it is that they go to. But then I want to be an active parent and be involved. All right. But what I struggle with is the stuff that I've said, which is teaching the other stuff. So teaching them how to be a person and a man and to be a human being, that comes naturally to me. But I think I've covered that because I've got a wife that is that way inclined. You know, so what exactly is homeschooling, like in the legal sense? And what is your guys' interpretation of it? Because you said it's not bringing school home, it's homeschooling. Can you define that for us, please?
So this is quite a debatable topic here. So depending on who you interview in this specific space, in this particular question, you're going to get a variety of answers. So you're
saying there could be people that were like listening to this, were like, hey, that's not it. Those people are wrong.
No, hands,
wow.
Exactly, absolutely. And that's okay. Because actually, ultimately, each parent is responsible for their own child. And we have a legal responsibility to raise our kids. That is a legal responsibility. And when we take it seriously and we start looking at what education can look like, then if we approach it responsibly, we will find education for our children. The law would like to be more regulated with it, and I understand why, because there's a lot of people who may claim to be homeschooling and actually not be engaging with their children at all. And their children may be sitting online all day, not doing very much, and they're not growing the whole person, which is the downside of being at home without having parental engagement and interaction. That's the challenge. Legally, we are supposed to be the predominant educators of our children. If we are homeschooling, if they're registered with the government, the Department of Education. A lot of people choose not to register with the Department of Education. Legally, you're supposed to. But there is an organization, the Pestalozzi Trust, who are very much pro-homeschooling. They give all of our legal advice to us, how we should approach homeschooling, what is your legal requirement, and what is your parental responsibility. They really help differentiate between the two. The Pestalozzi Trust gives good advice to parents. We decided to register our children with the Department of Education way back. It was many years ago. We've had a good experience of registering our children with the department as home-educated children, and other people have not had that good experience.
So when you start, you have to, is that what you're saying? So I just want to get the actual framework of it.
Okay.
When you've made that decision, what is then your legal obligation? Like what's step 1, step 2 into formalizing this thing?
So as a homeschool parent, a husband and wife need to make this decision together. Otherwise, it's not going to work because you're going down to one salary or at least 1.5 salaries because you have to commit the time. You sit and you say, are we prepared to choose to assign hours of our lives into educating our children? Now, I'm not saying it needs to be 8 to 2. I'm saying that depends on how you homeschool.
Yeah.
But you need to set aside the time to say, how are we going to do this? Once you've decided that, you've got one of two options. You register with the Pestalozzi Trust, or you register with the Department of Education. And I would never advise either way. I've been advising homeschoolers for years in various ways, but I will not ever make that decision for a homeschooler. They need to do
choose one, right? You've got to choose one.
You can do both. So I've been involved with the Pestalozzi Trust, and we're registered with the Department of Education. The point
is, the Pestalozzi Trust, do they do the registering for you? I'm saying what I'm asking is there an obligation or legal requirement to go register yourself and the kid?
So this is where it's tricky, and this is the conversation parents need to have with the Pestalozzi Trust. So if I was advising parents, I would say, go do your research now. Research the Pestalozzi Trust and what they are saying about homeschooling and the legal requirements, and then go look it up governmentally on the Department of Education websites, make an appointment, find out what your legal responsibility is, and then make a decision, because the chances are you're going to do one or the other, not both. We're unique in that, but you'll do one or the other.
I went and had a quick squeeze at the Department of Basic Education's website, and here's what they say about home education. Home education is a program alternative to attending public or independent schools where a parent of a learner of compulsory school-going age may provide education for his or her own child or children at home. If you prefer to teach your child at home, then you apply to the head of your provincial education department to register your child for home education. The lesson you offer your child must fall within the scope of the following compulsory phases of education. Foundation phase, grades 1 to 3. Intermediate phase, grades 4 to 6. Senior phase, grades 7 to 9. So, what records do you have to keep then? After your child has been registered for home education, you must keep the following: a record of attendance, portfolio of the child's work, up-to-date records of the child's progress, portfolio of the educational support given to the child, evidence of the continuous assessment of the child's work, evidence of the assessment and/or examination at the end of each year, evidence at the end of grade 3, 6, and 9 that shows whether your child has achieved the outcomes for those grades. Like I said, if you're interested in this, check out the Department of Basic Education's website. You can apply electronically, I think, and that's the first place I would start, just to check out what this whole thing is about, what the legal framework is, and what the Department of Education actually requires. The Pestalozzi Trust is a registered public benefit organization established in 1998 by a group of Christians to provide affordable legal defense and advocacy services to provide the rights and freedoms of all member families to educate their children at home according to their own religious, philosophical persuasions, convictions, and cultural traditions. Our goal is to preserve the universally and constitutionally recognized fundamental rights of parents and families to guide and direct the education of their children. Their task is prevention of conflict. We prevent conflict between the authorities and members by promoting knowledge of the rights related to education and by promoting better policy on home and private education. We resolve conflict situations by assisting member families and member schools who get into conflict with the authorities. We strive to resolve conflict before matters escalate to court. Should matters escalate to court, we carry the cost of a competent legal team and the necessary expert witnesses. The Pestalozzi Trust is a public benefit organization governed by a board of trustees. It is funded from the fee that members pay and a small number of unsolicited donations. So that's a little bit of information about the Pestalozzi Trust and the Department of Basic Education. Again, I cannot stress this enough. Please check them out for yourself. Have a bit more research. Listen to this podcast. Get in touch with us if you need more information, or we can direct you. But please, before you make any decision related to your child's education or upbringing, make sure that you do the proper research, speak to the proper authorities or whomever you trust. Make sure that you make the right decisions based on the information that you get. Back to the episode.
Most people that do this research and make this decision are already 100 yards ahead, because they are that serious about what they should be doing and what they should not be doing as parents. So already they're ahead.
Okay, cool. So you're saying then Department of Education, it's blurry.
It's not blurry. Look, for us, it was very clear. So we did the research, and this is now many years ago. So in those days, it was a case of before your child turns 7, they need to be registered in public or government. They need to be registered in formal schooling. That's the word. And if they aren't, you need to say why. And so,
like a school.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So you needed a little
So that's the
Department
law.
of Basic Education number.
Okay.
Yeah. Back then, it was the law. You'll have to check again now.
What is it now? Because it's
that's-
coming to me soon.
Yes, so
Yeah.
that you need to find out now. It's either be with the year they turn 7 or the year they turn 8. It might even be the year they turn 8. And it used to be that has to be that they are registered in formal education till the age of 16. I actually think that's also changed now to 15. But
Okay.
I'm not going to, don't quote me on that. I'll say that out loud. But there is a legal requirement that children need to be in formal schooling from a particular age to a particular age. Now, the Pestalozzi Trust is the alternative. So it's the thing that, or the group that is set up specifically to give legal advice to parents who want to homeschool and do it in a way that is above board.
Okay.
So we decided back then, the Pestalozzi Trust was only starting out, it wasn't a big deal then, it's huge now. And so we registered with the Department of Education. Our kids have their little public school number.
There's a number.
There's a
Wow.
number.
I had no idea.
And you send a little form in every year. Sometimes they ask for it. They asked, I think, the first 2 years, and I haven't heard from them since.
Oh, so they would actively come and ask, what's your number? How's things going?
I was really organized in the beginning, I have to tell you, and I was on top of it. I had the documents, I had the report cards, all that kind of thing ready to send in. And then I realized that there are more beautiful ways to home educate, like nature journals. How do we see what education looks like? And I realized that even the government is looking for evidence of learning. It's not necessarily looking for 100 worksheets that are filled in that your child can write by the age of 9 or that they can read fluently by age 10. That's not what the government's looking for either. And it's not what we should be looking for. We're looking for evidence of learning. So projects, going out on field trips, taking photos, being able to make collages, building sentences out of words from magazines or out of rocks and sand and shaving cream on the window. Let me tell you, it is very cool, and we do it on the day that our additional help comes in to clean up. Spaghetti, what you can do with spaghetti in education is fantastic, and that's how learning starts to emerge. It's tactile.
That's cool, man. So our kids go to a Montessori, and we did an episode with them. I think it's episode 7. So check that out also. And that's their philosophy, right? How kids are connected to their universe, and it's not just about them knowing their ABCs and being able to count from 1 till whatever. If they can apply that. They can't pronounce words, they don't understand nature, how we interact with living animals and non-living things. So it's a really cool thing. And I see my kids, their approach to life is already different. How they're learning, they do yoga, they take walks. So it really is interesting. Hence, I'm saying that I think the way we were told education should be, for me, I'm questioning that now. It doesn't seem like it's necessarily the right or the only way to go about it, because none of it guarantees any kind of success. But what you want is a human being that can function in the world.
Yeah, I think it's fair to say that it's not the only way. So with whether or not it's the best way or good or bad or ugly, probably dependent upon the circumstances of the mother and father and children. But definitely it's not the only way. There are other ways.
Okay. So are you guys able to give me some detail then in terms of, now we've touched on department and legal requirements, your approach then to it? So when you're looking at it, especially when you're starting out, and you said that there's things that are important, such as the character of the person, that sort of stuff. How do you start your day? How do you approach this thing? What's the curriculum for the year, for the month? How does it...
All right. Okay, Tshepo. So all of us homeschoolers, and I'm saying this to all of you out there today, you will all go in big, just like Tshepo was just mentioning. Your curriculum, how do I start my day, the schedule, and that's good. Yeah. Go in and do it as hard and as fast as you can and hit burnout. The sooner you hit the burnout, the better, because then you've done that.
Okay.
Clap it, get it out the way.
Because then you're trying to have school at home. What Seppo's describing is having school at home, right?
Yes. That's my understanding. Yes, that's what I'm saying. I want to know what it actually is.
So do that, and then you'll see your kids start falling apart, your wife starts falling apart, your marriage starts falling apart, everybody's crying, and you go, okay, we've done that now. Now, how can homeschooling actually look? And you start asking people who have done that as well and who have moved to the next step.
Okay.
And the next step becomes beautiful, because that is when you start to look at your kids and you say, what's actually important here? What are we trying to launch at the end? And you've mentioned it already. Somebody who's in touch with the universe, who can connect with people, somebody who understands how things operate, science, but how they operate and why. How do I engage with society and the environment, and why? And that is when we start to say and do some research into each individual child's learning style. And then the family, and usually, Grant and I would sit frequently and say, okay, this is how this kid learns. We decided maths, English, and Afrikaans was important. Not because those are our favorite subjects, but because we figured if something ever happened to me and these kids have got to go back to school, they need to be up to date on those 3 things.
Okay.
After that, we kind of had the idea that anything else is up for grabs. So what is important? What do we think is important? We're quite a faith-based family, so we wanted to bring the values of our Christian faith into the space. So that became a big part of what we brought in. So we brought our faith practices in, Bible study, character stories, things like that. Okay, that became. Exercise is huge in our world. Not negotiable, everybody had to pick a sport. You can pick 2 or 3, but everybody has to do a sport. So that was for our family a really important thing.
So that's the other thing now that you have to navigate, right? Taking them to...
Yeah, but they get good, eh?
Yeah.
And the thing is I'm not saying, you can get good at sports anyway, but if it's a thing that you say, this is part of growing up in your development, try things.
Yeah.
Try different.
So it's not like because when I was in high school, I was told that you have to play a summer sport and a winter sport. And you're like, I don't even like any of them also, So you end up doing something because, you got to survive. So I pick a sport because I don't want to be teased. You know what I mean? Yeah. So I had like an example in high school. So rugby was a big thing. But if you chose hockey, which you could have been great at possibly, you were looked at, that one is soft, you shouldn't do this. So these are all these things that plague kids in high school. And how do you deal with those things? And they don't creep up. How do they deal with their peers because they're home? That addition, I'm sure you get this question a lot, right? They're not interacting with kids daily. So
yeah, that's probably the biggest. The biggest thing that people would say against homeschooling is this social interaction thing. The number of times that we've been asked, "Oh, what about the social interaction? What about the friends and all of that?" But the homeschooling network is so big, and there's so many different homeschooling groups that you actually have to kind of reduce the actual social interactions because there's so many things going on, organized by these homeschooling groups, because they have that awareness of the social interaction. There's plenty of social interactions. You just choose what you need and what the best fit is. So the disadvantage of that interaction is not actually there. It's taken care of.
And how does the network? How does it work?
We all find each other.
Okay. There's a group, Facebook, I'm assuming.
Facebook, WhatsApp groups. I think at any given time, I'm probably connected to about 300 families.
Okay.
Not intimately. I have my intimate groups where we actually support each other more frequently. And then it extends beyond that into geographical areas and then curriculum-based and things like that. So that's another thing we'll get to just now, perhaps, is how curriculum works as you go on.
Yeah.
But initially, you want your kids interacting with people as they're learning. They need to love to learn. That's the point of this whole thing, is when they love to learn, it doesn't matter what they're doing. If they're learning to kick a ball on the lawn, or if they're climbing a tree, or if they're looking for things in the lawn, insects or different types of grass, helping young people love to learn. And that is one of the most important things. The Montessori group has got it right, I think.
Okay.
If only they could do that for more years into their formal education and structure it even more into their primary school and high school spaces. Because young people, if they love to learn, they absorb information as they go.
Yes, yes, yes.
And so even learning geography while you're doing your hiking. Going on soccer tour is fantastic. Where do you go and where are you playing soccer? At what altitude are you playing? You bring your learning into everything. And that's where they start to love to learn. So your interaction with other people, your sport, those were all super important in our world. And we also wanted them to learn another language, an additional, a third language. So they got to pick that as well. And and a musical instrument. So that we thought was well-rounded education for the early informative years, and the rest of the time they must be playing, they must be climbing trees, they must be going on outings, going to the Coca-Cola factory, and everybody has to go to the BMW factory. It's fantastic. Where you see a BMW from a sheet of metal into a car that starts in 2 hours.
Yeah.
That's just mind-blowing. That kind of thing is just exciting for the young people.
Okay. And the curriculum itself?
That is the curriculum.
Okay. The others, what do you call those other?
Okay, so the three things, all right.
You mentioned Afrikaans, those things.
So English, Afrikaans, and maths. And then as they get older, you have to start including things that they're eventually going to have to matriculate with. So there is a plan. Eventually, you need to start to bring in those other subjects because they have to get, well, for our family, that's another thing we decided, our kids must have a matric.
Okay.
So not everybody goes that route. Some people go to grade 10, then they go into trade school, or they go into they're already, a lot of homeschoolers by grade 10 are exceptionally talented as photographers or as they're professionals in their field outside of education already. And they're actually getting their certification levels.
Yeah, because they're interacting with that thing, whatever it is.
They're already in that.
In a natural way, in any case, right? So they're not going. So like me now, I'm podcasting, right? But I went to school where there was no creative arts per se, right? I only got to that in university, or it's something that you had to pick and go do outside. But in this case, it becomes part of the curriculum.
That's
yeah,
it.
so you can teach your children about podcasting. That's part of a curriculum. But there is multiple curriculums. There's loads of stuff out there in terms of the curriculum. And you can mix and match it. So you can get a maths curriculum from an organization, but don't choose their English curriculum, for instance. And you get the English curriculum for another organization. So you can mix and match the different curriculums.
So who are these organizations?
There are so many, and that's where home educators need to start. Well, parents who are thinking of doing it, you start to talk to people who have done it before. And you join the groups, and you start asking the questions, and you start visiting people, and start to get a feel for what works for your family.
Yeah.
We moved around quite significantly. In the beginning, like I said to you, I did 4 years before burning out. I'm quite energetic with this process. So we did 4 years of what we call box curriculum. So if the homeschoolers out there, they'll recognize that straight away. For new people, a box curriculum is where you go and you buy an entire curriculum of all your subjects for your children, and it's all set out for you. The book is there, what to do every day is there, the schedule is there, etc.
Okay.
And you bring it into your home, and you do exactly what they tell you every day, and you pop out an educated child at the end of the year.
So are these those normal, what I consider normal subjects?
Normal subjects, geography, history, science. They call
someone
different
is
things.
packaged
Life.
for you.
Yeah.
With what do you call those books where there's modules, guides.
Study guide is there, teacher guide is there, tells you exactly what to do, and I can see you getting more and more excited, like, oh, I could do that.
No, I'm definitely not
No,
getting
it's
excited.
fantastic.
No.
I'm glad I read that wrong, Tsepo. Look, I did it, and I encourage everyone to try it at least for a little bit, but it's a case of burnout for a lot of families because you've got 5 or 6 learners on different levels. You're not a school. You're not a school. So I can educate 3 kids on different levels doing geography. So if we are using Play-Doh, and I've got a grade 4 kid, a grade 3 kid, and a grade 1 kid, and we can use Play-Doh, and we can use paper and markers, and everything's out on the table, glitter, the whole thing, scissors, it's a disaster, you need a space for it, and it's all out there. What I expect as output from my grade 4 child is different to what I expect as output from my grade 1 child. If I'm looking at something from biology, the eye, I might ask my young one to work on making a ball or a circle out of it. And she's learning circles and a ball and rolling it. And then there's different colors in it. And I might while she's there, she's hearing them talking about the iris and, everything else about the eye. And the older one is needing to actually put the colors in the right spaces and explain to me why she has put this part and then the colored part and then the white part and, the everything behind the eye and all that sort of thing, why she has done that. She's explaining that to me, but my grade 1 child is hearing all of that. And so there's this multi-leveled, layered thinking and educating that's happening when you've got a room full of students on different levels, especially if they're all from the same family. Often people think you bring everybody's families together, and that is good, but not every day. Yeah. Homeschooling is different to that.
Yeah, so it sounds like it's how can I put this? I've had issue with formal education, like I said in the beginning, for a long time, right? Because I was in it, but and even now, like, so when I speak to some kids that I mentor, now the dog it's all good. We're in the home, right?
So that's Daisy. For those who'd like to meet my Dutch hound, it's Daisy.
No, I was saying, like, formal schooling, they just all put us in a box now, So when I'm talking to these kids that I mentor, because I asked this kid, like, I asked him when he started there in high school, how do they determine your learning style? How do they determine what you like, your temperament, that sort of stuff? Because you're walking into high school, and it's a big world, right? So this kid is on a bursary, and for example, he can't swim, right? So I'm like, you're already in matric, but you can't swim. So when you started this thing, what did they determine to be life skills? Things that are important, like critical thinking, like understanding oneself, spirituality, those kinds of questions. But in my view, swimming is like a life skill that you need. How is it that it got to this place? Because for me, formal schooling, a lot of it is just, look, they exist to make money. That's the truth, right? And they try to fill as many kids as possible, and they all put us in this box so that at the end, I don't know what the end goal is. I'm still questioning it myself. But for me personally, it wasn't something that was great because my mind and my temperament wasn't suited to that kind of environment. Hence, I'm finding other alternatives for my kids, because why would I then go through that and then bring them back in with the idea that it'll help them be successful? So, pros and cons of this whole thing in your personal experience again.
There are definitely both.
Of course.
And just to answer your formal schooling, I mean, the reality is that so few people can do the homeschooling thing. It requires 2 parents for one thing, or one very wealthy parent. But you need to be present with your kids while you're educating. And so whether the dad does it or the mom does it is irrelevant, but it still reduces the time that you're out producing for income's sake. So there are sacrifices that need to be made as far as finances go, at the same time as needing 2 parents. And so in a lot of cases, that's just not an option, especially in the way our global climate is at the moment. So I understand the need for formal education. I understand that we don't have enough schools in our country for obvious reasons. And I also know that we have designed an education system that does not suit the predominant demographic of our country. It's just not what it should be. And it's just so far off that I think a lot of people are suffering because of it. A lot of young people are not even realizing that there is a voice for them and a skill for them and a passion for them that they actually can choose, but they have to wait.
Yeah. No, I think that's what I was saying. That's important of the podcast, right? So a lot of times you don't know what your options are. So we're speaking about let's say my example again, right? You're speaking about a kid from a township from Soweto, and you are told that the only way out of here is education, right? I remember when I was a kid, there was this term called education is the key to success. When I was a child, I didn't even know what a key was, nor what was a success. I was like, what does that even mean? So, and then you go to a school, and then I got a bursary to go to a private school. And you're like, okay, cool, now this is definitely the key, right? If I get through this school, I'm going to be rich. I'm going to be a billionaire. It's going to happen. And then it doesn't happen. And then they say you have to go to university, right? I get to university. Half the people I start with drop out. Half the people I know that I went to school with aren't doing the thing that they studied, right? So there's no direct correlation between the school that you go to and success necessarily. Hence, I'm saying, okay, what is the alternative? Is there a hybrid of homeschooling and formal? So, you know what I'm saying? So I like the notion of, because my philosophy of parenting is I would like my kids to guide me, right? I don't really want to force them into something. There are important things that they need to learn and understand, but ultimately, they are their own people. And the sooner they discover that, the better for me, right? So that everything I'm doing is aligned to them in terms of who they are as a person.
And their launch.
Yeah.
And I think there's some deconstructing. Yeah, we'll go into that, Nana. You want to go first?
Yeah, so what I wanted to say, to speak to what you've just said, is one of the major advantages of homeschooling is it gets specific. It's specific to the actual child. I mean, with formalized traditional schooling, you get 30 or 40 pupils in a class and you get one teacher. It's impossible for that one teacher to focus in on any one particular child and their needs. I mean, the teacher must simply get the curriculum out there, and the children are left to their own devices in terms of how they take it in and how they apply it and how well they do it. Whereas with homeschooling, it's usually the mother and it's usually one or two children. And so it's like literally one-on-one, one teacher, maybe two children. And so it's very focused education. It's very focused to where the mother sees the passions of the child. So, and it's easy to alter the day-to-day education according to what the mother sees coming out of the children, you know. So if a child has got a passion for astronomy or something like that, then you can focus on that. You don't need to do biology. You would then kind of focus where the passion is. And that's one of the highlights, is you get that focused attention.
As a father of two boys, I believe it's important to save for my children's future and put something aside each month for some of my goals, dreams, and ambitions. Finding the right investment partner, one that has taken the time to understand myself and my family, has been a challenge until I was introduced to the MSM Property Fund. From as little as 300 Rand a month, you can invest in local and offshore real estate. Offshore investments include those listed in the United Kingdom and Germany. Financially, things have been tough because of the effects of the COVID-19 pandemic. But instead of buying myself a nice bottle of whiskey every month, I put aside $300 to invest in property. As someone new to investing, I get monthly newsletters, monthly reports with online and phone support. All I do is sit back and watch compound interest do its magic. For more information and to sign up, visit msmpropertyfund.com. That is msmpropertyfund.com. Cool. So I want to quickly circle back to the pros and cons. What are the pros and cons?
Sorry for taking that circle. I just noticed that we did that. So good point. All right. So some of the okay, let's
start with the pros.
Okay, is that easier? So some of the pros is that chasing a child's passion. You teach them to follow what's going on in their head and mind and their passion. So they are learning as they go. So learning begets learning if it's in a positive environment. Okay, so those are all the pros. They engage with people of different age groups constantly, which means they're not just able to engage with people of their own age group. They are able to communicate with adults and small children, because usually when they're on socials, it's everybody all together. They are able to be exposed to far more things in far more ways. The relationship with the family, here's a big pro. You have a structure in your family that is communally decided within the family. And so there's a communication that has to happen. Grant and I have got to have a marriage that works, because otherwise we can't pull this off. So for the better part, it's not always, but for the better part, you actually see homeschooling families where there's a husband and a wife, they're married, they're the same parents of the children that are in the household. You know that old nucleus family that we used to see in pictures and that? You see that a little bit more frequently for longer because there's a system that is feeding off of it. It has purpose. It's not easy for that to end. If you end that, so many things fall apart, you know? So, I mean, that's one thing Grant and I have had to really spend a lot of time on over the years, is how do we stay connected so that this thing works? And I'm not saying homeschooling is the reason we did that, but homeschooling demanded it of us.
Needs it.
Because otherwise it swallows you up. There is an overwhelmingness to it if you're not careful. Holiday times. You get to go on holiday outside of high season.
Hey!
So that's a big plus. You educate as you're in transit. School doesn't have to stop. You can communicate with your kids and travel with them and be a part of their world. I think in a lot of cases, children stop talking around about age 11, 12 with their parents. When you're homeschooling, there's always communication. Really? And you keep talking through teenage years. Yeah, sometimes it gets really loud and sometimes it gets very obnoxious from both sides. I will have to admit, sadly, I can get very tense too. And that's the reality of it.
Just quickly, that you do. I'm saying that part there. Because those are one of the things that I'm worried about, right? I've heard this, that they get to a certain age and then they basically get taken by their friends or their environment, and they're no longer relying on mommy and daddy for whatever information. So are you saying that your bond and your, not bond, but communication is
there's bonding.
Stayed strong even?
Yeah, your bonding, your communication, it looks different and you got to stay in the game. It's a choice every day to stay in the game. Yeah. It's very easy to check out because it overwhelms us sometimes. But this is a pro. This is not a con. This is a good thing. If there's sound in your house, even if it's yelling sometimes, it's still coming out. It's still, there's not silence. You also get to put some boundaries in place as far as how much social media space there is in your home and where it takes place. You can actually say, right, this is the tech zone. You're allowed to be on tech this many hours a day or this few hours a day in this area. And everybody's tech is in the same place. You actually get to help your young people get further into their maturity before they're exposed to as much as they are going to be exposed to. We're exposing children to far too much too early. Yeah. Because we're not there.
Yeah, we're leaving them to the world, basically.
Exactly. Yeah. And whatever they pick up over their device. And so there's a little bit more control over that just to get some more maturity in there first, build the character, help them understand their identity, which only the identity phase is between 11 and 14. So right now, 11 to 14, most young people's identity has been influenced by social media and their friends at school, but predominantly social media and their friends through social media, though. It's not even what we're doing now, one-to-one conversation.
Yeah, no, it isn't.
It's through social media. Even if they're sitting, they're talking through their media. So in what ways can we encourage maturity to be able to be prepared for that and then bring it on, still coaching? You're coaching your kids then as they go into teenage. You're not really parenting anymore, but you're coaching them through, right, now you're on Facebook, now you're on TikTok, now you're on Instagram. How are you managing these people? How do you deal with conflict online? When they block you, how do you respond internally for yourself? What do you know about yourself that is true, that is not what was said? And hold on to the truth of what this is, not what is being said out of somebody else's pain. Yeah. And you start to be able to coach our young people through those years to where they're 16, 17, 18, they can very quickly see, no, this person's hurt, that's why they're saying that. It's, and these are all the pros, but the challenges, we've got lots of cons too, but the challenge is to stay in the game, because you get tired and you want to run away some days. But go con.
Right, so one of the biggest cons, one of the biggest disadvantages, I guess, is there's still a stigma attached to homeschooling. So people still have this wrong view of homeschooling as somehow you're taken away from your child's social interaction. So it's the biggest question about over the 20 years that we have been doing it, the biggest thing that comes back is, well, what about the social interaction? They're just sitting at home all day. They don't socially interact. So how are they going to cope with the world as they get older and older? And that's simply not the case because there are so many of these homeschool groups that organize these social interactions that it's simply untrue that they don't get the social interaction. They do get the social interaction because the network is so big and it's so connected to each other. And then the other stigma associated with homeschooling is somehow that the educational level is less. That because you homeschool, the level of education is less than traditional education. That your children, because they're homeschooled, they won't be able to get O-levels, A-levels, or they won't be able to get into university because the educational level is somehow lacking. And that also is simply not true. I mean, there's so many curricula that you can purchase or rent or use. There's also a whole bunch of free stuff. You can get free stuff on the internet, good quality free stuff. So it's simply not true that your child won't get to whatever educational level they need to get to in order to fulfill their passion. So those are the two disadvantages, I reckon. It takes a lot to go against that trend of not going the traditional education route. To homeschool invites in stigma.
And I think that's part of the con, I think, for us women who are doing it. I don't meet many men who are doing it. I meet many men and women who are doing it together, or women who are doing it. But it is to see the value in what you're doing as a calling of some kind. It has value. It is a career choice. It's a thing you do for a season of your life, and it is worth it. And I think I think that's why there are so many social interactions, because the parents need to see each other and remind each other of this. Because we are often, and especially in the early years, swimming upstream, where it doesn't always feel like what you're doing is of value because society doesn't deem it such. Yes. But the very thing we're trying to teach our kids is society does not deem what is valuable to you. And yet we are struggling with it ourselves as women in this space. And it's changed a lot over the years because it's become so huge. And there are so many more people doing it and empowering each other to see the value in it. And there's a lot more of us now that have graduated students. So we're able to remind them that, look what is possible. It's okay. Your kids are going to do great. They are okay. Because you can't ever tell. It's an 18-year project without knowing how you're doing. There's no, what do you call your corporate check-ins with your boss? You know, how you're doing, and do you get a raise this year or not? No, there's none of that. It's consistent. You're not sure. Sometimes everybody's kids go through the hormonal years, and you think it's your own fault that they're now 13 and they're hormonal. No, every child who's 13 is hormonal. That's okay. It's part of their development. It's how we respond to it that makes the difference. But that is a con. It's difficult for women to see the value in who they are in this space, because society is not giving them that.
Yeah. So what you're saying, I'd say feedback, right? Because I mean, if your kid is going to a particular school and it's visible, like to that environment, to that community, that, oh, this one is thriving. And you can talk about it in the dinner parties that my son, my daughter's doing 1, 2, 3 there.
Or we blame the teacher, right?
Yeah, or the teachers.
Now who do we blame?
Yeah, but I guess then a lot of it is like I was saying earlier, what we've been conditioned to value as a society, right? Because apparently there's some collective value system that we're all supposed to have, which is, again, what we're supposed to be success, what's supposed to be the pathway to success also, hence why maybe the stigma sticks, right? You just conditioned to pick what has been there for years, but it's very evident it's not entirely working. Like I don't think the world needs more examples right now that our approach to life generally maybe needs some questioning and to see if there's alternatives.
That's why there's so many mental health problems, and there's so much burnout, there's so much suicides, because people can't somehow cope with life because they perhaps haven't been given the skills to cope with life, because they have these unrealistic societal expectations. You've got to go to university, you've got to earn a couple of $1 million a year, you've got to drive a certain car, you've got to marry someone particular. It's just ridiculous. And that's the way, and it all starts with education. So if we can free up some of these constraints and allow the child to explore their passions and their desires, then it'll be better. They'll be able to cope better because they'll be doing what intrinsically they want to do.
There's something really important, if it's okay, Tsepo, to throw this in. It's been a huge part of my homeschooling journey. And I know you have various podcasts on men and fathers, and I really need to speak into that a little bit, if that's okay. Because I've been involved in this for so many years, it is very obvious which families have fathers that are pro-homeschooling. So there are many families that homeschool and the dad is, am I in this or not? I'm not sure if this is going to work. Is my wife actually doing anything with my kids? Yeah. They're looking for outcomes-based education. They want to see the report card at the end of the week, what my kids have done, etc., etc. I'm not saying that's a bad thing. What I'm saying is I've had the support of Grant throughout these years, putting me in the expert role constantly. Even when I took myself out of it and I kept thinking this thing isn't working, I don't know how this is going to work, are these kids going to launch, will they actually be able to fit into society? We question all of that. Even though the science is backing us up now, we've even got research backing us up, we still have these moments. And I have to say that if it wasn't for Grant constantly telling me that my worst day with my kids is still better than any teacher's best day with my children, because I know my kids and he knows my kids. Honestly, anything. And I kept educating. He kept saying to me, do you want to study? What do you want to do? Do you still want to work on the sideline? And I'll pick up on Saturdays and take the kids on the outings, and you go and do courses or see clients on Saturdays. Do you need a break? He used to send me to Cape Town every year for a weekend.
Yeah.
Every year. I was like, yes, that was just amazing. I'm not saying that has to happen, but the support that reminded me frequently that this is my calling. I am the best person for this job, not because I'm educated for it, because I am their mother. We made these kids. We know these kids. We love them. So I will do everything I can. And obviously I take responsibility for researching, making sure I'm surrounded by people who know better than me, constantly asking, what do you see? Trying to get assessments done if I suddenly need an assessment done, you know. And honestly, he would, and this is another big thing, throw money at it, men. Because so often it becomes, all right, you homeschool and I'll bring in the money.
Yeah.
And it becomes two separate jobs suddenly.
Don't we always, That's
we
our
want
thing.
to own something,
Yeah.
right? And so it's so important to say, right, we homeschool and we bring in the money, and I, if it's Grant, happen to be the one who goes out to bring in the income, and you happen to be the one that interacts with the kids during the day. That doesn't mean that the money is mine and the kids are the woman's.
Yeah.
It's not how it works,
Exactly.
right? And so we budgeted every year, and from the very beginning, we set up a budget, a homeschooling budget, based on what people who are 10 years ahead of us were doing. So by the time our kids started getting into sport, and let me tell you something, they will get good at it. And they suddenly want to play provincials, and now they're traveling, flying places and going international, and your kids get good at stuff.
Yeah.
Because
they want to.
They want to. They're
Yeah.
hungry for it. You found their passion. You found the best coaches, because now they're beyond what you can teach them. And we had the money for that already set aside because we planned for success. Grant, always said, what do we need for homeschooling this year? We eat, we donate money to what we should, whatever. And then the homeschooling budget, what do we need this year? And I would plan and we would buy stuff. We were never looking for money for the home education because he said it's important that there's money for this. And that made a huge difference.
Yeah.
There was never a time I was like, oh, how are we going to do this? And I have to try and find the extra pennies to support our education. What is that? You know, if we are educating our children, then yes, I might do the part that is around the table or taking them on the field trip. He might be the one going into the corporate world to bring that in, or even the other way around.
Yeah.
The point is, it's a collaborative journey with the kids. That has made a huge difference. Huge.
Awesome.
Which touches on the other con, the other disadvantage is people think it's cheaper.
Yeah.
So people will think, okay, I can save all the school fees, the traditional route. So if I don't send the kiddies to school, and if I homeschool, then I'll save all those thousands. The money that you were going to use the traditional way, you got to use for the homeschooling way. So, there's no saving.
And in fact, as people transition from mainstream schooling into homeschooling, our first comment to them when we sit around a table and have these conversations is, put the money into the homeschool budget now. You're going to travel with your kids. You want to be moving with your kids. You want to be taking them places. You want to be buying curriculum and then changing your mind and buying something else. You want to be so pro this process that you haven't sucked that money into a new car or into, I don't know, something else. We've heard some very elaborate stories of where the school fees are going to go. Different podcast for that one. But what you're saying now, Grant, is actually it's huge. That's one of our first things we tell people.
Yeah.
So that's a pro and a con. I think that's advice more than anything.
Thank you, Millar family. I appreciate that. Thank you so much to the Millar family, and thank you guys for listening and streaming this episode. Please don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Make sure that you rate our content. As always, I appreciate your support. See you next episode. Sharp. Proudly produced by 1730 Media. This episode was brought to you by our friends at msmpropertyfund.com. Remember, wealth management is a journey, not a destination.